everyone, welcome to our podcast. Here we're going to discuss prosecutors as one of the many legal professions and their code of ethics. In this podcast, we're going to know about what the legal profession's ethics are and why is it important, the relevance of ethics in everyday legal practice, the legal basis, ethical principles, sanctions for ethical violations, ethical challenges, and case studies or real-life examples. Before first understand what the legal profession ethics are.
All right, legal professions, ethics or legal ethics are guides for legal professionals like lawyers, judges, prosecutors, and many more in conducting their job. With the presence of legal ethics, a certain standard is set for these professions, which will affect how justice is upheld. With that, it is clear that legal ethics are an essential piece of the legal profession. Here in our podcast, we are going to mainly discuss the legal ethics for prosecutors.
Wait, aren't all lawyers supposed to win their case, and isn't that the point?
For a defense lawyer, yes, winning is the goal, but for prosecutor, it's different. Think of it like this. The win is when the right thing is done, even if it means dropping the case, offering a fair deal, or admitting a mistake. It's not about ego, it's about ethics.
So you're telling us that prosecutors don't always go for the harshest sentence.
Yeah, exactly. I also agree with Nayra. Believe it or not, justice doesn't always mean the maximum punishment. A good prosecutor knows when to be firm and when to be fair. Sometimes rehab is more than jail, especially for someone who just made a bad choice, not a life of crime.
What happens if a prosecutor ignores ethics? Like, what's the worst case scenario?
Worst case, an innocent person goes to jail, where a guilty one walks free, a community loses trust. And for the prosecutor, disbarment, public shame, and also career crash. So yeah, it has big consequences.
I agree with the high statement. Honestly, ethic isn't just rule book, they check across a year. It's embedded in everything they do. As prosecutor, I believe that we make choices every day that affect someone's freedom, reputation, even their future. If it's in the small things, how they evaluate evidence, how they speak to a witness, and how they treat defense.
So do you agree if I say ethics is the compass?
I couldn't agree more, Ofra. Ethic is what keeps them from crossing the line between a power and abuse. It's not about looking good in court, it's about doing what's right when no one is watching. And for a prosecutor especially, that matters because their credibility is everything. If they can act unethically even once, the public start to lose trust, not just in them but the whole justice system.
Okay, now, are ethics actually relevant in everyday legal practice?
Of course, for a prosecutor, code of ethics are not just when they're in the courtroom, in the daily decision, like whether they submit the charges, how they handle the evidence, and how to communicate and interact with the victim and suspect. Code of ethics is relevant in an event where prosecutors have to resist political pressure, avoid corruption, and ensure that every accused person get fair trial. Even something as simple as not leaking case details to the public is part of ethical responsibility.
Maybe I would like to add, in real life, prosecutors often face dilemmas. For example, what if the evidence is weak, but there's public pressure to convict someone? What if a powerful figure tries to influence the outcome? So this is where ethics act as a compass. They help prosecutors make the right call.
Exactly. Ethics are what keep the justice system fair, balanced, and human.
I see. I believe all the answers have helped clarify our understandings of the ethics of the legal profession. Specifically, this prosecutor's code of ethics and its relevance in everyday legal practice. We can now proceed to the next topic of discussion.
Hello, my name is Karina, and I am your moderator for today's podcast. Here I am joined with Sekar and Felicia. So, to begin our discussion on this topic, Sekar, could you briefly explain what is meant by a code of ethics in the legal profession and what regulations govern it for prosecutors in Indonesia?
Surely. First of all, thank you so much, Karina, for having me and Felicia in today's discussion. So basically, a code of ethics is a set of principles that guide professional conduct of workers, for example, in this case, prosecutors. And For prosecutors, it is regulated in Peraturan Jaksa Agung or Attorney General Regulation Number 14 year 2012 and Peraturan Kejaksaan or Prosecutors Regulation Number 4 year 2024.
Okay, now that we understand the legal foundation, Feli, could you elaborate on some of the core ethical principles that prosecutors must uphold in their professional conduct?
All right, so the first and foremost is the principle of integrity, or we call as integritas. So this is the backbone of a prosecutor's character. Integrity means acting with honesty, consistency, and also a strong moral compass. A prosecutor with integrity does not compromise the truth for personal or political gain. So they do not take shortcuts whatsoever, and they absolutely do not accept bribes or abuse their authority. So in a system where trust is everything, integrity is absolutely non-negotiable. So next, we have impartiality or imparcialitas. Prosecutors are expected to remain neutral when handling a case. So this means to follow the evidence, even if it leads to a result that's unpopular or politically inconvenient. So prosecutors must evaluate both evidence that incriminates or clears a suspect. The goal is justice, not conviction.
Yes, and additionally, we also have responsibility and accountability as one of the core ethical principles. Basically, responsibility and accountability, or we could say it as tanggung jawab or akuntabilitas, meaning that prosecutor must be responsible in how they prepare and present cases and accountable for their decisions. Every move they make can affect lives, so they must act transparently and in line with both law and professional standards. If prosecutors violate ethical guideline, they can face disciplinary action or even legal consequences.
Thank you to the both of you. That was very clear. Now, Feli, could you explain what types of sanctions may be imposed if a prosecutor violates these ethical standards?
Okay, so violations can result in disciplinary actions, which includes written warning, suspension, demotion, or even dismissal. In serious cases, the prosecutor can also face criminal or civil liability, which completely depends on the nature of the misconduct itself. So the procedure of sanctions is regulated in both Perja 14 of 2012 and also Perja 4 of 2024. So although Perja 14 of 2012 still applies to this day, but because of the legal principle of lex posterior derogat legi priori, Perja 24 of 2024 will take priority. So we will start with a short explanation on Perja 14 of 2012 because Perja 24 of 2024 is more relevant today, which will further be explained by Sekar. So this regulation puts the burden of examining to MKJ or Honorary Counsel for prosecutors. So they function to examine reported violations and also decide on the appropriate sanctions. So the sanctions itself in this regulation mostly focuses on administrative actions.
Yes, and but currently we have also Perja for 2024, which means in this Perja for 2024, it regulates the suspicions of violation may arise from a report or examination. For example, in Article 14, it stated that the parties that may conduct inspection are the Chief Prosecutor or Deputy Attorney General for supervision, based on the position of the suspects. Furthermore, a review is conducted to determine whether or not the action is a violation of ethics, and the suspect is allowed to give a clarification in that case. And in Article 21, it also regulates that the suspect may be relieved from work during the case procedure or the investigation procedure. Once this case is determined to be in violation of ethics, it will go through many different inspection and examination before later determining whether the suspect will receive a letter of decision on the imposition of ethical sanctions. So those are the difference between Perja 14 and 2012, although there are not much difference from both of these regulations.
Thank you very much. That was a very important aspect to understand. So, upholding these ethical standards not only protects the public interest but also strengthen public trust in the legal system. Before we close this segment, let me ask one final question. In your opinion, why is it crucial for legal professionals, especially prosecutors, to consistently uphold these ethical values in today's legal landscape?
Yeah, so as we all know, right now we are at the digital age, whereas everything in this era of transparency and digital exposure could be shared and known by the public, or we know it as the jejak digital. So basically, by maintaining this ethical standard is more important than ever because even minor misconduct, it can damage the credibility of an entire institution.
I completely agree with what Sekar just said. So these prosecutors, they hold great power and also responsibility to uphold the rule of justice, the rule of law in society. So if they fail to uphold ethics, it can result in miscarriages of justice, which ultimately will be very detrimental towards the public's confidence in the legal system, which will later lead to chaos in the country.
Thank you very much, Scott and Feli. So that wraps up our discussion on the code of ethics for the legal profession. Stay tuned as we move to the next segment of our podcast.
Thank you.
Okay, to make it more concrete for our listeners, could you share a real life case where a legal professional, particularly a prosecutor, was involved in an ethical violation?
So there was a real-life case regarding a corruption scandal which involved the prosecutor Pinangki Sirna Malasari. So basically what she did was she accepted a 500,000 US dollar bribe from Joko Chandra, which was the defendant in this case, to influence the issuance of a Supreme Court legal opinion that would prevent his prison sentence from being enforced. Pinangki even drafted an action plan involving other attorneys and judges to aid with this, promising to give them 10 million US dollars.
Yes, I heard about this case too. She then used the money to purchase a blue BMW X5, rent an apartment in the US, pay for a beauty doctor, home care doctor, and even cover her credit card bills. That is straight up money laundering.
Well, that's a quite serious misuse of funds. Do we know what legal consequences she faced as a result of those actions?
Yeah, apparently she was found guilty of three charges, namely corruption, money laundering, and also conspiracy to commit corruption. All of these acts are a violation of Article 7 of the Code of Ethics of Prosecutors, specifically letters A, B, and D. And for corruption itself, she was threatened with up to 5 years in prison and a fine of 250 million Indonesian rupiah, which falls under the corruption eradication law.
And for the money laundering part, I heard she could face up to 20 years in prison or even get fined 10 billion Indonesian rupiah under Article 3 of the Prevention and Eradication of Money Laundering Law.
Considering those legal provisions, what kind of ethical and disciplinary measures were taken based on the prosecutor's code of conduct?
Well, based on Article 12 of the Prosecutor's Code of Conducts, if a prosecutor breaks the rules, they can get administrative sanctions. But that doesn't stop them from also facing criminal charges or disciplinary action under civil service regulations.
That's true. According to Article 28, Paragraph 2, if the prosecutor is found to have violated criminal laws or disciplinary rules, the authorized official has to take further steps based on the law. In this case, the sentencing could follow the Indonesian Prosecutor's Office law.
So, beyond the criminal implications, were there any administrative sanctions imposed on her as a prosecutor?
So after the whole thing, Pinanki got a disciplinary action sanction from the Deputy Attorney General, which removed her from the structural position as a prosecutor.
Not only that, the Central Jakarta District Court sentenced her to 10 years in prison or fined her 600 million Indonesian rupiah or an extra 6 months in jail if she couldn't pay. However, she ended up filing an appeal, and the Jakarta High Court reduced her sentence to just 4 years.
That's a significant reduction in sentencing. What reasons did the court provide for granting this appeal? And how was that decision received by the public and the legal community?
Apparently, it was because she's a mother who deserves a chance to raise her toddler at a time. Also, as a woman, she's entitled to care, protection, and fair consideration. In the end, this argumentation got a lot of criticism for seeming as if she was receiving special treatment. Yeah, even with all those considerations, she still played a part in corrupting the legal system. I think this just shows how there needs to be a systemic reform within Indonesia's legal institutions. I think some solutions that can be put in place include strengthening whistleblower protections, enhancing the independence of supervisory bodies such as the Komisi Kejaksaan, and also ensuring that appointments within law enforcement agencies are based on merit rather than personal or political connections.
Yes, that's true. This case serves as a reminder with that without transparency mechanisms, even those entrusted with enforcing the law can become perpetrators of injustice. Without such reforms, the rule of law in Indonesia will continue to be undermined and public trust in legal institutions will remain fragile.
Ethical challenges in the legal profession. With globalization and technology advancement, how do you see social media and digital platforms play a role in prosecutors' way of conducting their job?
So it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, social media gives prosecutor real-time access to public sentiment, potential witness, even digital evidence. But here's the catch: what if a high-profile case goes viral?
Yeah, suddenly prosecutors are under pressure to react to the court of public and not just the court of law, and I think that's where the ethics get shaky.
Yes, I agree. And suddenly, prosecutors are not only required to uphold the law, but also seems to have win in the court of public opinion. And honestly, that can really put their ethical footing at risk.
With again social media and diverse digital platforms, there's an increasing trend of legal professionals sharing legal insights or opinions online. How can we ensure that these activities remain ethical?
Okay, so for prosecutors, the ethical lines for online using are even sharper. There's no leaking case details, no public commentary on active cases or active matters, and then you have to stick to general legal education also, and you have to not give your opinions on active matters. You have to avoid prejudicing trials, respect the trial process, and always uphold the integrity of your office. And most importantly, the courtroom not only the place where the justice remain restrained, but also the online world.
Prosecutors also have to ground themselves in the rules. Most prosecutorial bodies and bar associations provide clear ethical guidelines on their communications, including social media. Regular training and internal review are essential. Prosecutors represent the state. Even a single post can impact public trust or their fairness or of proceedings.
Okay, and I do think that ultimately it's about intent and the discipline of the prosecutor itself. Prosecutor Indonesia must also adhere to the national legal standards, including the Kode Etik dan Pedoman Perilaku Jaksa. Sharing legal information can serve the public good, but it must avoid speculation and maintain the due process and reflect the integrity of the legal system in Indonesia. Whether it's offline or online, our constitutional and ethical duties remain unchanged.
Okay, I see. To make sure code of ethics are being maintained, are there any professional organizations that can take on this role? If so, what actions or measures can they take?
Okay, so it's a very good question. So in a lot of professional fields, there is actually an official bodies or association that have a role in making sure the ethical standards are upheld. For example, for lawyers, we have Pradi, and for prosecutor itself, we have roles that are carried out by the prosecutor commission. They are kind of external supervisory institution that monitors the behavior of prosecutors, especially regarding ethics and professionalism.
Yes, besides that, internally, the prosecutor's office has a deputy attorney general supervision team. They handle reports from the public and also continue to conduct investigation if there are allegations of violations.
And you have to take notes that the sanctions can be very serious, starting from warnings, transfers,
postponements of promotions, or even dismissal if the violation is very serious.
Okay, nice. So it's not just about the legal expertise, but also character. Ethics are apparently that important because, in the end, public trust is not only built through knowledge, but also through integrity and responsibility in carrying out the profession. We can now move on again to the next segment of our podcast. And that brings us to the end of today's podcast. If there's one thing we hope for the listeners to take away, is that ethics are not just a set of rules. They are the foundation of justice. For prosecutors and all legal professionals, upholding ethics is essential to maintaining public trust, protecting human rights, and ensuring that law serves everyone fairly.
As future legal practitioners, we carry a responsibility far greater than just knowing the law. We must live with the integrity, impartiality, and also accountability.
So let this be a reminder that power to enforce justice must always be guided with strong ethical values.
And with that, we invite all of you, our fellow student and future college, to keep learning, stay grounded in your principle, and commit to professionalism every step of the way.
Because at the end, it's not about being great at what we do, but about doing it right. Thank you for listening to our podcast.